Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Miha and welcome to the channel. This is the April AI News Roundup. I will give you a few stories that really stood out to me, and they are all on one common theme, and that is that we've seen a bit of a plateau in terms of AI adoption, not because of lack of interest or demand, but rather because of constraints on the infrastructure around the technology. And all the stories that I'll talk about today are in some way related to this. Our first news is from OpenAI. OpenAI announced this month that they missed their target of 1 billion users and they have 900 million. Now, that's still a large number, but it is 10% below their forecast. OpenAI claims this is not because of lack of demand, but rather because of a compute bottleneck. The hardware can simply not keep up at this point. And this could be the first signs of a demand plateau. I'm not suggesting that demand will fall, but rather that it may grow at a more constant pace as the hardware infrastructure and supply chains behind this technology struggle to keep up. And this brings me to the second story, which is the cost of all of this compute power and the cost of the investment in the infrastructure to support it. NVIDIA recently announced that in some of their own work, the cost of compute exceeds the cost of human labor. This means that it might be cheaper to keep people rather than to deploy AI, at least in some use cases. You may have seen articles or read posts on LinkedIn where CEOs or companies brag about their broad adoption of AI and how they're burning through tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars of tokens a month. And at some point, you have to ask the question, if you're spending $100,000 on AI a month, wouldn't it be cheaper to simply hire 2 additional software engineers? We are entering a world where the price of compute is in some instances more expensive than hiring people. And that is a really important consideration to keep in mind. And this brings me to the third point. Is it worth investing in all of the latest models? OpenAI released ChatGPT 5.5. Claude is still pushing Mythos. But is it worth chasing these newest models? Well, I did a simple experiment to test this. I gave a number of AI models, old ones and new ones, a simple set of instructions. I asked AI to give me a diagram explaining how to fold sheets. These are the sheets with rubber bands that I've never been able to fold properly. And here are the diagrams that I received. I showed these to a number of audience over the past 2 weeks, and the results of this simple experiment were mixed. People preferred different diagrams. There was not a consensus, and very few people actually picked ChatGPT 5.5 as their best solution. So why did it happen? Well, it turns out that for everyday use, for basic productivity, the kind of things that we cover in this channel that probably many of you use, it really doesn't matter which model you pick. They're probably all good enough for basic tasks. Where these models are really starting to shine is in specialized roles. Think of it like cars. If you want to go fast, you buy a sports car. If you want a car that's comfortable, that can transport your whole family, you probably want an SUV. And if you want a car to pull heavy loads, well, you need a big truck. Think of AI models in the same way. ChatGPT 5.5 is an improvement, but it's tuned to do specific things. It's good at coding. It's good at agentic work. But for everyday use, it really doesn't matter. And now ask yourself this question. If you are a complex organization and you need AIs to do several specific things, and you need several different models to do those things well, are you going to be paying multiple subscriptions? Will that increase your costs further? What will that do for your return on investment? Again, it's another important set of questions that we need to answer. And this will also impact compute demand in how many data centers we need and the type of models that people actually have an appetite for. Companies aren't the only ones that are noticing some of these changes, so are governments. In terms of regulation, I have a couple of updates. First, from the United States, we've seen the Department of Justice pushing back against states. The federal government seems to want to preempt patchwork regulatory environment where every state has its own rules. These are still being played out in the courts, so we'll see what happens. Something similar is happening in the European Union. This month, some of the negotiations on the EU's AI bill stalled. However, the August deadline still stands. And of course, other countries are also developing the regulation. but there is little coordination across borders. And if we end up with a very fragmented environment where the laws in the United States, in Europe, in Asia, Africa, Latin America, for example, are all different, then what does that mean for the cost of doing business? Will AI companies develop different models to satisfy different regulatory environments? If they do, that cost will very likely be pushed on to consumers. But the question is no longer if regulation is coming. The real question is when it's coming and how will companies adapt. I think that governments were initially enamored by this talk of AGI, a super intelligence that will make everything better and easier. Now, however, we move from this moment of awe to a little bit more scrutiny. And governments are asking, what does this mean for costs? What does it mean for power use and water use? And if AI is using a lot more of these resources, what does it mean for the rest of the economy? What does it mean for our communities? And all of these stories combined mean that we will likely see continued pressure on not just the cost of AI models, but also on the rest of the supply chain. And I think we have some very important questions to answer as a society. Where do we want AI models applied and where do we not? What are we comfortable using AI with and where do we absolutely want to retain complete human control? I am convinced that the winners will not be those who have the latest models, but those who know how to apply them well, do so efficiently, but also know where not to apply them and know where human judgment and human intuition can be more useful, more fruitful, and perhaps more profitable. And this concludes the April News Roundup. The next video I'll be working on will cover job applications. We did a short topic on this a few months ago, but now we're going to go much more in depth. I know the job market is bad right now. I work with a number of my alumni and friends, help them really tailor their resumes, and we've come up with some really interesting strategies. And so I'll walk you through those in the next video. I'll show you the different AI tools that you can use in the process and how they can be useful. And of course, I'll share some prompts that you can use, whether you are looking for a career transition or whether you're helping someone else. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.